The Selfish Giant by Oscar Wilde, Part 3. With the children no longer visiting the castle's garden, and winter being his constant companion for months now, the selfish giant missed the warmth and colors of spring. But one morning, as he sat on his bed in despair, he all of a sudden heard some lovely music. The music was so lovely that the selfish giant first thought it to be the king's musicians playing a melody. But he looked to his window and saw that the music was a song sung none other than a beautiful small bird sitting on his window pane. "I believe spring has come at last," said the giant excitedly. He jumped out of the bed and looked out the window to see his garden, and he was surprised by the sight that met him. Through a hole in the tall wall the selfish giant had built around the garden, little children had managed to crawl through and enter the beloved playground. And with this, the garden almost instantly responded to the children's presence. Snow crept away, removing her cloak from over the grounds, and the sleeping flowers awoke, all bright and beautiful, to greet their friends. Frost packed up a paint and fled, leaving the trees colorful, strong, and with sturdy branches boasting fresh new leaves. The birds flew into the garden, followed by excited squirrels, all twittering, singing, and chirping happily, watching the children enjoy themselves running around and playing to their little hearts' content. The garden had come back to life, and what a wonderful sight it all was. Watching all the happiness and delight unfolding before his eyes, the selfish giant felt ashamed for not understanding how giving and kindness brought about happiness, and how this happiness could bring about color, warmth, and fervor in the world around him. Just then, he noticed at the far corner of the garden there was a small boy jumping up and trying to reach the lowest branch of a tall and grand tree. He started crying when he could not reach the branch, and the tree tried to help the little boy himself by bending down as much as he could. But the boy was too small and still could not reach the branch to sit on the tree. He kept crying, and with the little boy's tears, winter found a way to cling on to the small patch in the garden. The giant's heart melted. "How selfish I have been," he said. "Now I know why the spring would not come here. I will put that little boy on the top of the tree, and then I will knock down the wall, and my garden shall be the children's playground forever and ever." The selfish giant was truly sorry for his actions, and so he climbed down the castle stairs and out onto the garden, hastily making his way to the little boy standing and crying in the garden's last bit of wintry patch. Once the children saw the selfish giant, they got terrified. They did not know that he had good intentions. He still looked scary, and that was enough for them to scramble together and quickly run out of the garden. The little boy in the corner did not notice the giant, as he was still crying and trying to reach the lowest branch of the grand tree. The selfish giant hurriedly but quietly approached the little boy, and it is only when he was standing right behind the child that the small boy turned around and noticed him. But the boy did not look afraid. Instead, he looked up at the selfish giant with hope in his eyes that maybe he could get some help getting up onto the tree. The selfish giant gave the little boy a kind smile, picked him up gently, and placed the little boy up on the tree. Happiness filled the child, and he squealed with joy. He threw his tiny hands around the giant's neck and gave the giant an affectionate kiss on the cheek, thanking him for his kindness. And with all this happiness, winter lost its final grip on the garden, and spring took over. The other children who were looking on from the hole in the wall understood that the selfish giant was selfish no more. He had become the kind giant, and this gave them the courage to run back into the garden to play some more, bringing back spring to the entire castle. "It is your garden now, little children," the giant assured the children kindly. He then went ahead and tore down the wall and the ugly sign with a large axe, giving everyone access to the castle's garden. The children cheered loudly, for their favorite playground was now returned to them. From that day on, the children came to the garden every day after school and spent their afternoons playing and having the merriest time with the kind giant till the evenings when they bid the giant goodbye, only too happy to see him and the garden again the next day. The giant loved playing with the children who visited him, but he also always wondered where the little child was, whom he had helped up onto the grand tree, as he never saw the boy again after that beautiful day when he changed from being the selfish giant into a kind giant. He asked the other children if they had seen the small boy, but all of them said they never had seen him before that day in the garden. That was a little strange, that. Years passed, and the giant grew old and feeble. He could not play with the children anymore, but he sat on his rocking chair and enjoyed watching them run around his garden, chat and laugh, and have the happiest time together. He did not mind the winter making its occasional visit either, for he understood that the flowers and trees needed their rest, and the birds had other countries to travel to as well. After all, spring loved the kind giant now and would come back to the garden very soon. One spring afternoon, as the old kind giant looked through his bedroom window out onto the garden, he got another surprise. There in the corner of the garden, after all this time, stood the little boy again next to the grand tree. His favorite child and one he missed seeing all these years. This time, the little boy was not crying. He instead turned around and smiled up at the giant. The giant hurried down the castle steps and out onto the garden. He made his way across the grass, flowers, and trees till he reached the little boy. He then asked the boy kindly, "Can I help you up onto a branch again today?" The small boy replied, "Nay. You helped me all those years ago and let me play in your garden. You saw the error in your ways, and you grew from being a selfish giant into a kind giant. You spent years of your life thereafter being wonderful to all the children who came to spend time in your garden. You have now given enough, and it is time for you to rest. Today, you shall come with me to my own garden, called Paradise." That afternoon, when the children ran onto their beloved playground, they saw the giant lying dead under the shade of the grand tree in the corner of the garden. This did not make the children sad though, for they saw the giant lying peacefully on the soft green grass, surrounded by the most exquisite white blossoms they had ever seen. And they were right not to be sad. After all, the kind giant was now in heaven with his favorite little child, where he lived happily ever after. The end.